Okay, awesome. All right, so where we're going to pick up is in the chapter Working with Others. And we read a little bit so far. And so we're going to pick up we're going to reread some of what we've read already, but let's pick up at the bottom of page 92. And one of the things I'll just really quickly summarize what we did so far in the chapter Working with Others, because a lot of what we did was addressing some old ideas or some preconceived notions that I know I had about sponsorship. And so some of the old ideas that I had was that I had nothing to offer. I couldn't possibly help someone. And what we saw and what we read so far is that all I have to offer is my experience with this illness, my experience with these steps, and my experience with the spiritual awakening. That is all I have to offer, and that is more than enough. Another old idea that I had was that I was going to somehow make it worse, right? I'm going to show up and I'm going to make this thing worse. And what we just read last week was about how when we're working with somebody new, we should really bear down on the hopeless feature of the malady, bear down on, that if I have this illness, if I have the mental obsession, if I have the physical allergy, I'm in a hopeless position and it's fatal, which means I can't make it worse. You know what I mean? Fatal is as bad as it's going to get. I can't make this thing worse. So that's another old idea. Another old idea was that, man, maybe I'm not cut out for sponsorship. But what we started with is the promises, and the promises in step 12. Now, there's more than those, but the first two paragraphs are powerful promises for step 12. And in those promises, it spoke about how that really, if I want immunity from drinking, if I want immunity from relapse, I've got to work with others. So it's for me. I need to work with others. I need to sponsor others. The other thing is sometimes I might think, and we didn't really talk about this as an old idea, but we talked about these, where we would go to find newcomers to work with. One of the most simple places is to find them at a meeting, right? But it spoke about some other places we could find new people to work with, people to help. But the biggest thing, the takeaway from that is I need to make the approach. I'm going and I'm finding them. I'm making an approach to them. I'm giving my number, but I'm getting theirs as well, so I can reach out to them. So that's a bit of a summary of what we've done so far. And what we're really, on page 92, what we've been doing is laying down the foundation for step 1, really explaining from our own experience that cycle, explaining from our own experience the mental obsession and the physical allergy. So laying down the foundation of step 1. For those who've been around this study a little while, we often frame things, or we frame the steps as problem, solution, and program of action. So another way to look at what we've done so far is we laid down the foundation of the understanding of what our problem is. So let's pick up at the very bottom of page 92, very bottom paragraph, and we're going to see where we transition from step 1 into step 2. Or another way to say it is transition from laying down the foundation of our problem to laying down the foundation of what our solution is. So it says, continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. See, I can't make it worse. It's already bad. Talk about the conditions of body. Now, when we talk about the conditions of body, again, that's the physical allergy. That once I start, I need more. And I'm not able to control the amount that I take, and mind, which accompany it. When we talk about the condition of mind, what we're talking about is that mental obsession, that thought that I have when I am as sober as I am today. And my illness, my alcoholism is untreated, and it tells me this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'll go out for 3 days and I'll get it back together on Monday. Those sorts of lies. So welcome those who just joined us. We're on the bottom paragraph of page 92, and I'm glad you're here. So it says, keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. That's what I have to offer. The directions in this book and my own experience. Explain that many are doomed to never realize their predicament. Doom's just another way to say hopeless. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. What that sentence is saying is doctors don't really want to tell alcoholics that they're hopeless. They don't want to tell people like us that we're going to die of this thing because it's just going to depress them and there's not really an answer. But so we may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. And in this book, we've seen where that hopelessness is mirrored with that hope. So we can talk about the hopelessness because we have hope, the solution. You will soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, the traits of the alcoholic. If his own doctor is willing to tell him that he is alcoholic, so much the better. Even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he's become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question if he will. And this is where we begin to transition into step 2, or the solution. And welcome to those who just joined us. We're on the very top of page 93. So it says, let him ask you that question if he will. Tell him exactly what happened to you. And what happened to me? The spiritual awakening, the spiritual experience. And you'll notice that this direction is given to us in italics. I always call it squiggles, the squiggly writing. Awesome. Thank you so much, Stacy. I really appreciate that. So the squiggly writing, because I'm an adult and that's what I call it. Now, keep in mind, when this book was written, I couldn't get like italic font by hitting Control-I or Command-I if you're on a Mac. So if nothing else, I might have helped some people learn how to, the shortcut to italicize your font. They actually had to go into the printing, like the printing process, and physically change the font. So it cost extra money. Now, I want to point out, this was money they did not have. And if you're wondering, that means that about 80 really, alcoholics agreed to spend money on that. If you're not wondering what a miracle that is, go to your home group and try to spend some money and just see the arguments that ensue, right? So it is so important that about 80 drunks were like, yes, we will spend money we don't have on this thing. So what we are supposed to do is explain exactly what happened to us. And that is the spiritual experience. To stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. Again, that's in italics. You don't have to conceive or think of or conceptualize God in the same way I do. You can come up with your own conception. In fact, it says he can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing. So it doesn't matter what I believe. This is what matters. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and live by spiritual principles. And what are we talking about there? Step 2, part 1, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves, that there is one. Step 2, part 2, could restore us to sanity. So I have to have a belief in a power greater than myself. But one of the main themes of this whole book is that faith without works is dead. So I need to start with a little sliver of belief. But I also have to live by spiritual principles. What is it to live by spiritual principles? Work the steps. Work the steps like my life depends on them as a way of life. That's what it means, doing these steps. So it says, when dealing with a person, you'd better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. There is no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues, no matter what your own convictions are. See, I don't need to convince anyone what their God needs to look like, what their higher power needs to look like. I can let them have their own experience, and it's better to use common, simple language. I don't know about anyone else. When I came to, 12 step, I heard that G-O-D word, and I made assumptions. Now, of course, today I use that word God. And I share with people, when I use that word God, what I mean is the power that I have accessed. When I use that word God, what I mean is what I have experienced as the result of the 12 steps. And what I mean when I use that word God is a conception of a power greater than yourself that you are most open to. But like so many people, I heard the word God and I made some assumptions about what people meant. I always like to point out, being a newcomer, I wasn't going to ask. I was not going to go up to anyone and have any clarification. Hey, when you mean God, do you mean this? No. I don't want to communicate with you because you might ask me questions back that I don't have the answer to. You know, questions like, how's it going? You know what I mean? So I don't want people to get too close, right? And so, yeah, it's given us use that everyday language. If I have a particular faith, wonderful, but I'm going to be more effective in just using general plain language. And so it says your religious prospect or your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he is going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. But he will be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. And there are people that like come with deep religious faith that cannot stop drinking or cannot stop relapsing. That is a thing that happens. But I will say, just in my experience, far more what I've come into contact is with people who have been around the rooms for a long time and have been relapsing and relapsing. And it says, when it talks about, you know, in that case, he's going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. What I already know is what gets me in trouble. There's a saying, it's like what two words are on every alcoholic's tombstone. I know, those two words will kill me. I know, yeah, I know. Because what does I know? It's blocking me from the truth. Because if you're sharing that with me, I don't know. It's more effective to say, I understand. But I know I've done the I knows. And I knows keep me away from you and keep me away from the solution. So if we have somebody that's like, I have more religious education and training, how could you help me get connected with that power that I already know? Or I've been around 12 steps for this many years. I know what I need to do. Well, it's going to give us specific directions on how to approach that. It says, but he will be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. He may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. Belief is not enough. Knowing, and I'm pointing to my head for those that are just listening, that head knowing is not enough. What I need is that deep experiential heart knowing. And so he may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. So to be life-giving, especially for someone like me, my faith needs to be accompanied by self-sacrifice. Oh man, you mean this whole working with others thing? It's supposed to be inconvenient? Yep. And unselfish constructive action. What is an example of unselfish constructive action? The actions of all 12 steps. That's what we're doing. So faith without works is dead. That theme carried through. Let him see that you are not there to instruct him about it or instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but call to his attention the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it or he would not drink. And that's like a bit of a like, oh, sick burn, like it's a mic drop, you know, just that like, it's really kind of like that, how's that working for you? You know, if you've ever gotten the how's that working for you coming from your sponsor, like, yeah, that's what it is. Like, boom, oh, you got me, right? But yeah, what I know does not keep me sober. What I do to access that power which is a God of my own understanding. That's what keeps me sober. So it says, perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed to practice the very precepts he knows so well. And it goes on to reiterate, we represent no particular faith or denomination. We are dealing only with general principles common to most denominations. We're not Christian, we're not this faith, we're not that faith. And it's wonderful if I am. But we're talking about general spiritual principles that any human being of any faith or none can take and have an experience of God of their own understanding. And so page 94, it says, now is when we're transitioning. So we're outlining what our solution is. That's what we've done so far. We're outlining step 2, right? The solution being the spiritual experience. Now what we're outlining is the program of action, which is the 12 steps. Another way to look at what we're doing is we're laying down the foundation for the 3rd step decision. So the 3rd step, what I'm deciding to do is to work these steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, kind of because it does, right? I'm deciding to do this work. And I got to know what the work is before I decide to do it. So that's what we're doing. So it says, outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal. The self-appraisal would be step 4. How you straightened out your past, that would be step 9, right? When I went out and made amends. And why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him, step 12, right? And keep in mind, I might not have said this earlier, step 12 has 3 parts. As it's written on, well, step 12 was written on page 60 of the book, but also as it's written on the wall or on the Zoom share screen, right? The first part is having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. So it starts with a promise that if I do these steps to the best of my ability, I will have this experience. It's promised to us. And we saw that as we started, it started with a promise. And one of the most sure signs of a spiritual experience is the desire to carry this message to somebody else. And then it says, step 12, goes on to talk about how we carry this message to others, right? So carrying this message, working with others. So that's the sponsorship piece. And then the 3rd piece is practicing these principles in all our affairs. Oh man, all of them, all of my affairs, even in traffic, yes, even online, yes, even with my in-laws, definitely yes. So that's what we're talking about. So it says it is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. And how true is that? Actually, he may be helping you more than you are helping him. And it's one of those things, I find that line to be a little bit of a litmus test. And so when I'm reading that with sponsees and they have not yet sponsored anyone, their response to me is like, no, I don't think so. Absolutely not, Paige. That makes no sense to me. But when I've read that line to people who've already started working with others, that's when they're like, yeah, you know what I mean? So that's kind of my litmus test. So if you are here today and you're like, Paige, that cannot possibly be true, I promise you it is. And if you have not had that experience yet, let us help you. That's what we're here to do. Awesome, thank you. All right, so make it plain that he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. And that's one of those things. When I work with my sponsees, we go through the book together and we go through line by line. And when you go through with sponsees in that way, that's not the only way to do it. But when you do it that way, from the beginning, in step 1, in the doctor's opinion, for those who have been coming to the study, like, man, it's telling me early on Like, I've got to keep going, right? Like, I've got to not keep going. I got to keep working with others. We haven't even, there's times we haven't even talked about the allergy yet. And it's like, man, I got to sponsor others. It's an early on prerequisite, right? Absolutely. All righty. So, and it says, suggest how important that it is that he placed the welfare of other people ahead of his own. What a revolutionary idea. At least it felt that way when I got here. And then I got to that line where it's like selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, right? And it's like, what? No, not me. I'm busy thinking about me, but not me, right? And so it makes sense that centered in God and thinking of others is what will help us to overcome that self-centered, selfish thinking. So it says, make it clear that he is not under any pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off. And that's the thing, like when we're working with people, and we're really going to get into this, if they don't want to work the steps, if they don't want to follow my suggestions, if they don't want to do the things that I do, if they want to keep drinking, if they want to keep using, okay, do it. Yeah, do it. You don't have to do what I do. Have your own experience. And see, that's the thing is I can't make anyone willing. That's not my job. My job is to have a deep and profound connection and relationship and experience of God. My job is to be well versed in these tools, in these 12 steps, in this way of my life. And my job is to have my hand out to you if you want it. I can't make you willing. That's alcoholism's job, right? That's addiction's job. That's not my job, and so if you want it, I'm here. If not, that's cool too. And genuinely, no shame, no hard feelings, right? And it says, so you should not be offended if he wants to call it off, for he has helped you more than you have helped him. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. Now, we love happy, joyous, and free. And we ought to love happy, joyous, and free because, man, so many of us weren't happy, joyous, and free for so long. But how we get to happy, joyous, and free is in step 9. We've got to be frank, open, and honest. And in step 12, when I'm working with others, showing up sane, quiet, and full of human understanding. I'm expecting chats to come in and be like, Paige, you're not very quiet. You can get a little loud. I know. Spiritual progress, guys. I'm working on it. All right. So it says, maybe you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to follow your suggestions. Man, only in a place like this is hopelessness a good thing, right? When I've had this illness just kick my butt to the ground, and I'm willing to take actions I wasn't willing to take. Last week, I spoke a lot about that window of willingness, because I'm going to say something controversial. It's not super controversial because I still need you to like me. But I don't believe in bottom. I don't believe in rock bottom, because how many times have somebody like me said, that's it, that's my rock bottom. And then what do? I drink again. I go out again. And how many times have we said, that's it, that's my rock bottom, and we've gone back out. Yeah, and it always gets worse. So what do I believe? I believe that what happens is I get into enough pain where there's a window of willingness that opens up. And if I take the spiritual action that's directed in this book while that window's still open, I can get well and stay well. But if I don't, my experience has been that window closes and off I go again. And so that was my controversy for the day. Hopefully I don't have anything more controversial, because 2 controversies is too much, and I've really overcome my I was going to say people pleasing, but we know it's not people pleasing. We know it's self-seeking when trying to be kind. So I thought I would overcome that. No, absolutely not. All right. And that's the thing. The more hopeless I am, the more I'm willing to take these steps out of this book. Yeah, because they didn't sound like good ideas when I got here. So the more hopeless, the better. And what a gift. That hopelessness becomes that gift for me to grab onto the hope that is on offer. And it says your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all of the program. He may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. So that drastic house cleaning, what we'll have is step 4, the discussion with other people is step 5. Isn't that kind of the step we rebel at? It's like, oh, I don't want to do 5. I don't want to tell somebody those things, right? And it says, don't contradict such views. Tell him you once felt as he does, because didn't we? You know, we all had that, I don't want to do that one, or amends, no thank you, or amends to him, no thank you, right? Exactly. At some of these, we balked. We did. And it's not a moral thing. I think it's a human thing, you know? These are ego deflating actions. And my ego does not like to be deflated, so it's going to rebel, right? So don't contradict such views. Tell him you once felt as he did, but you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. Again, your experience, our experience. So it says on your first visit. So what I want to point out is all the conversation that we have had, that we started last week, where we were reading on page, where did we start, 92? And we were laying down the foundation of step 1, like all of that. And all of what we've read so far is happening in the first visit. It's not taken long to just, now keep in mind, we're not going to dive in necessarily right now, but this is visit 1. So it says on your first visit, tell him about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And keep in mind, we usually meet people at meetings, so they probably already know about the fellowship. So we don't need to be like, have you heard of the fellowship? Well, you're in the meeting. They know. But it says, if he shows interest, lend him your copy of this book. And what I will say about that is I really believe there are people who are assertive enough and able-bodied enough to get their book back. I'm not. Like, I just, yeah, at some of the others we barked. Yes, absolutely. I love that. But I'm not assertive enough. If I lend you a copy of my book, I will say there are times I'm untreated Al-Anon, which makes me a really good detective. So I could probably find you. But as long as you go up a flight of stairs, I'm not going to be able to get my book back. You know what I mean? So I will help you get a copy of the book. But I do know people who do lend their copy of the book, and they're like, yeah, because I'm going to see them, like, then they have to see me again. And I believe they are assertive enough to get their book back. I know my limitations. All right. So top of page 95. Unless your friend wants to talk further about himself, do not wear out your welcome. Give him a chance to think it over. So we've laid down the foundation of step 1. We've offered the foundation of step 2. Our solution is a spiritual experience, and our program of action, these 12 steps. These are the actions that you will have to take, right? And it's, so we're going to let them make the decision. We're not going to force, we're not going to pressure. So if you do say, let him steer the conversation in any direction he likes. Sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he is likely to say you rushed him. And what I want to point out about those sentences is we're talking about starting step 4 in the first meeting, day 1. That's what we're talking about. So sometimes we'll see like, oh, take your time, don't rush. No, we're going to see that we're going to be diving in meeting 2, you know, after they've read the book, right? We're going to be diving in. So what we're talking about is day 1. We don't want to wait to get into this work. We don't want to take time with this work. Like, we want to give the work time, but I don't want to sit on any of it. And in my experience, it so does not take long to get well. And when I'm looking at the work and somebody like me, a jerk, is saying it doesn't take long to get well, it's like, oh man, you're going to want me to do all of that stuff right now. A little bit, yes. But the solution is incredible. If I had any other illness that was doing in my life what my alcoholism or my addiction was doing to me, we wouldn't want me to wait. We would want me to go, right? Or to my family or my loved ones. Let's dive into this work. So, but caveat, don't start on your fourth step on the first meeting. Wait at least until the second. That's the rest period. All right. So it says you will be most successful with you will be most successful with alcoholics if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they worked with you. Offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help. What I love is that mirrors that sponsorship contract we see in there as a solution. I believe it's on page 18. It is, yeah, bottom paragraph of page 18, where it says that the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole deportment, and my deportment is how I carry myself, how I show up to life, how I act and react. My deportment shouts, so not me yelling, even though I can get a little loud, and I'm sorry if I woke up your respective dogs, cats, or babies, I'm so sorry. But the deportment is what is doing the shouting, that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except a sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. So that is talking about, that's the approach that I ought to bring to that new person, that we're equal, that I'm no better than you, I'm no worse than you. We're going to see on page 100 that we're shoulder to shoulder in this thing. And what I'm doing, let me read that comment. No need to start. Yeah, fair enough. So, sorry, one of the comments was I had knee replacement surgery a few years ago. Once I'd recovered from the surgery, the physiotherapist didn't say, no need to start the recuperation exercises for a few months. Just come along and watch others do their exercises. No, that is a beautiful example. Yeah. All right. And so, and also, if you're wondering, I really did struggle with the word recuperation. So that's an interesting one. But yeah, what I am to do is simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools. And what are those kit of spiritual tools? These actions taken out of this book. That's it. And I need to show you how they worked with me. So part of my responsibility to you is to continue to do this work. So if you're like, hey, I've got a resentment to my physiotherapist, right? I can say I've been there. Here's how I would work through it. Here's how I did work through it, right? So I am skilled at making these or taking these actions. My tools are sharp so that I can help you. And I, again, offer friendship and fellowship. And I just love that line. Tell him if he wants to get well, you'll do anything to help. And when I say that, I mean that. If you give me like an inch of effort, I will bust my butt to go a mile for you. I really will. If you just give me a little bit, I will do everything I can to help. But I will be honest with you. What I have is this. This is the thing that has worked in my life. This is the thing that has transformed who I am in a fundamental way. If you want something else, I'll do my best to help you find it, but I don't have experience with it. This is what I have. And if you want it, man, give me a little bit and I will bust my butt to try to help it happen for you. And I really will. So it says, if he's not interested in your solution, if he expects you to act only as a banker for his financial difficulties, it's real good that I don't have the income to be a banker for anyone's sprees or financial difficulties, or a nurse for his sprees, or in my experience, a receptacle for venting. That's an awkward way of phrasing that. But like that's not, I can't do that. I don't have space for that. It says you may have to drop him until he changes his mind. This he may do after he gets hurt some more. See, my job isn't to convince anyone. It's to let alcoholism or addiction do its work. And that's the thing. And even if somebody doesn't want it, it's not a shame. I just want to emphasize, it's not shame. If you're like, man, I don't want to do all this. I get it. It's a way of life. Yeah, I hear you. I do a lot. Now, keep in mind, I need to. I'm very sick, as I'm sure my sponsor will tell you. But yeah, I get it. You don't have to if you don't want to. This is what I have to do. If you want it, let's go. It says, if he is sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. And just in my experience, now I do know some sponsees or sponsors who will offer to their sponsees, go and listen to a big book study. Maybe some of you are sponsor mandated to be here. If so, welcome. Glad you're here. Oh goodness, thank you. I so appreciate that you're here. And and so like they'll be like, go and listen to a big book study, because a lot of the stuff in this book, man, I couldn't get. I'm not stupid, and I couldn't get on my first reading or my second reading, or I couldn't even get in meetings. I needed to sit with people who would explain it to me. And when they were able to mirror their experience with what was in the book, I was able to mirror mine with what was in the book. And so what I do, I'm just going to tell you what I do. What I do with my sponsees is I sit down with them and I read the book with them. And it looks a lot like this big book study. Honestly, it looks a lot like that, although we take more actions together. And then there's a little more back and forth. I don't make my sponsees type it in the comments. We communicate verbally. But that's what I do. And I'm going to share with you just what my sort of ideal and what I found to be really effective with sponsees is I like to meet my sponsees for about an hour or two a day, going through the book line by line. And in so doing, I can get them through a full set of steps in about 30 days, 60 if they're sitting on some of their fours, sitting on some of their amends. And I sit with them through that process. And I know there's people here that is like, that's a long time. 30 days, 60 days, that's for some people here, that's a long time. And there are times where it's like, man, I know that sponsee isn't going to make it the week. And I have ways of going through it a little quicker and following very specifically these directions here. But I found that to be really effective. And what I found effective in it is not only do we get through the steps quickly and thoroughly, but when I'm able to match my experience with what's in the book, I have two sort of a double sense of authority. I work with a lot of people who have that, like, oh, I couldn't possibly sponsor. Oh, I couldn't possibly help anyone. But when we're able to be armed with facts about ourselves as mirrored in this literature. I've not had a sponsee that went through this way and went through and wasn't able to do the same for others and work with others. So I've just found that really effective, not only in them getting the solution, but helping others. And that's not the only way to do it. And if your sponsor has you do it a different way, I'm not right. But I keep in mind, I love this book. And every time I read this book with the sponsee, it is a new experience, not just for them, but for me. And when we see a direction, we take it. When there's an action, we do it together. And it's just incredible. And that's how I do it. So I do a whole lot with have them read the book. I'm like, no, I'll handhold. We'll do it together. All right. And it says, after doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends. I love this line. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. So if I want to have this experience, again, I can't nag. And believe me, the untreated Al-Anon, I have tried nagging. I have tried various forms of manipulating and I can't make anyone do a 4-step if they don't want to do it. I can't make anyone do the inventory or the amends or the whatever. I can't make anyone do it. That decision to do it is between us and ultimately the God of our own understanding. But I can help lay down the foundation for that. So it says, if he thinks he can do the job in some other way or prefers some other spiritual approach, we encourage him to follow his own conscience. So if I'm working with somebody and they say, thank you so much. If they're saying, man, I don't want to do the steps, or I just want to go to meetings, or I don't want to do 12 step. I want to do this other thing. I just want to do counseling. Yeah. If that's what you want to do, try it. Try it. Because one of two things will happen. One, it could work. It didn't work for me. It didn't. None of the other things that I tried worked for me, but it could work for them, right? And if not, what's happened? Well, I've crossed off something that I've tried and it has not worked. I've crossed off one of those. It'll help get me to that place of hopelessness. If I have the illness that is outlined in this book, what I will need is a spiritual experience, and nothing less than that will work for somebody like me. And if I don't continue to have and grow that experience, I'm surely going to drink and go out and die. Like, surely that will happen again. But that might not be your experience. But I also had to come to the end of myself, the end of my abilities, the end of my good ideas, the end of my yeah buts, the end of my all of that. I had to try. Then try that on my own, and then realize that my best thinking did not work. So I'll try the thing that seems to be working for you guys that are like happy and enjoying life and sober, those things that I didn't think could all happen together, So I'll try what you guys have. It says, we have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that worked with us. But point out that we alcoholics have much in common, and that you would, in any case, like to be friendly. Let it go at that. One of the things is I always try to leave it on good terms, or leave it with my hand out. Often in sponsorship, what happens is I get ghosted. I just don't hear from them again. That's usually how those relationships end for me. And what I try to do is I try to always be the one with my hand out and reach out last. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can just be like, hey, if you do change your mind and you want to give this a try, I'm always here for you. And sometimes it's as simple as, I'm always here for you if you want to give this a go. As simple as that, because I want my hand to always be out. And so it's popping over to page 96. It says, do not be discouraged if your alcoholic prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. See, if people don't want this thing, my job isn't to convince them. My job is to have my hand out for those that want it. And there are people that want it. So I got to go and seek and find them again. I've got to go make that approach. That's got to be my intention. And man, when that's my intention at meetings, finding people I can help, finding people I can work with, when that's my intention in service, when that's my, yeah, I know, the Joe and Charlie joke. I did make that Joe and Charlie joke when I was on, sorry, the ADHD that I absolutely do not have took over. I'm really good at focus and maintaining attention. So my job, I'll go back and make the joke. My job is to go and seek and find, and when that's my intention in what I do, it changes the meeting. It changes how I show up to all those things, like showing up with my hand out. How can I help? Who needs my help? It's not always the person who's brand new coming in the rooms. Sometimes it's that person who has been around a little while. Maybe they're in and out, or maybe they've been sober and the magic has left. That light, that fire is gone. And they think that maybe this thing couldn't help. Who can I help? When I show up with that in mind, everything changes. So it says, you are sure to find someone, with desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. So the Joe and Charlie joke, and I made this when we were in the directions around how to take sex inventory or relationship inventory. It's the joke about the confused sponsee. So let's say I'm a brand new sponsee, and I go to my sponsor and I'm like, listen, I've met him, capital H, him, Mr. Right. I don't know if you're aware, the blue of his grippy socks matches the blue of his eyes. or the brown of the AA coffee matches the brown of his eyes. It's meant to be, And my sponsor is like, oh dear, oh goodness, I can't even deal with this. And my sponsor says, Paige, go read the directions on romantic relationships. Go read the stuff on sex. I'm like, okay, what page is it? And my sponsor will tell me page 69. And so I'm going to be a good sponsor. I'm going to go, and you'd think I'd remember, right? Like it's pretty easy to remember, but I'm like, okay. And I go on my way home, page 69, page 69, page 69. I'm going to do it. I'm going to follow my sponsor's direction. I really want it to work with him, Mr. Right Now, I'm going to make it work. And I was like, what? Wait, what page? What page? 96. Right. 96. All right. So here's how I make it work with Mr. Right Now. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man. I'll just leave it there. So that's the joke about the confused sponsee in 69 and 96. But in all seriousness, in all working with others, we find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. And kind of one of the things that I've just found really kind of helpful is, or what I've seen is with the cannot or will not, a lot of times with sponsees, oh, wait 1 second, there's a comment. My new sponsor says you need a new experience. This time when I have brought it up, my new sponsor says you need a new experience this time when I have brought up what I felt last time when I got sober. Absolutely. So I thought it was going to be a joke about 96 and 69. So I was reading it with that tone, and then I didn't pre-read the comments. So that's why I was reading it with that inflection, because I'm like, my sponsor says a new experience. All right, let me find the new guy at the detox. Click. That's what I thought the joke that you were making. That's not what you were saying. I'm so sorry. All right. I'm so focused. I love comments in the chat. Genuinely I do. I have a great time with them. If one of the common areas where it's like cannot or will not work with me, or at least what it's looked like, has been times where sponsees are regularly no-showing, rescheduling, or canceling. And that happens a lot. And that I am pretty patient, but that's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I'll just be honest with you guys. Because showing up is that's like the easiest part of this thing, right? And what I've found really helpful is just to have a very honest conversation about that. Because what I found is a lot of people that I've worked with that have started the rescheduling or started to cancel or started to go down that road, they don't know. And so what I said often will say to sponsees or people that I'm working with when they want to cancel or they want to reschedule is like, and of course I'm not like, I understand if emergencies come up. What I'm talking about is when it really begins to become a pattern. What I've said is you can do that if you'd like, but I want you to know in my experience, I have not had anyone who has done that stay sober. I've not had anyone. And that has been my experience. And I remember doing that with somebody and she genuinely did not know. And she genuinely could not conceive. And it's obvious, sometimes it's obvious to us, but when we're doing it, it's not. That if I'm rescheduling something, that thing that I'm rescheduling is not the priority. So if I'm regularly rescheduling, working with my sponsor, I'm not making recovery a priority. And they genuinely don't know that. So I found it really helpful, without judgment, without anger, without anything like that, just to give that information. Hey, in my experience, those who do that never stay sober. I've never had a sponsee that did that stay sober. And I've just found that really helpful. So it says, if you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. One of our fellowship failed entirely with his first half dozen prospects. That's 6, 6. And we're talking about Bill. Bill struggled with his first 6 months of sobriety. he was working with a whole bunch of sponsees, and none of them were staying sober. And of course, it was because he was leaning in with his white light spiritual experience, right? Yes, absolutely. Live and be happy. Like, that's what I'm after, not just sobriety, because sobriety is awful and sobriety is painful. Contented sobriety, happy, joyous, and free. And if I do not have, see that thing, oh, I'm off on a tangent and I didn't finish my Bill W. story. I will come back to it. But emotional sobriety is not top tier extra special sobriety. It's a minimum requirement for somebody like me. If I do not have that emotional sobriety, that spiritual experience, that connectedness with a power greater than myself, the insanity of alcohol will return. The mental obsession will come back, and I will drink, or I will pick up, or I will use again. And that is my experience. So yes, to live and be happy. So Bill, he was working hard for 6 months and nobody was staying sober. And he was leaning in with that white light spiritual experience, his clean wind on the mountaintop blew through and through, like amazing, wonderful. He was leaning in with that. And you know what it'd be like if somebody came up to us and was leaning in with that. It's like, bud, I'm good. No, thank you. But it was when he started explaining what his problem was from his own experience. The first person he did that with was Dr. Bob. And obviously, Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson, that's where this thing took off, right? So, yeah, it says, so he failed with his first half dozen prospects. He often says that if he had continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others of who have since recovered of their chance. So there is that word again, recovered. So it says, suppose you're making, this is, sorry, I'm like, that's the good place to leave it. So hold on, let me read. I don't care who dies. Oh my gosh. So there's a comment, I don't care who dies in a movie as long as the dog lives. There's a website, it's called doesthedogdie.com. And you can look up the movie or the show and make sure the dog or whatever animal makes it out okay. And that we'll pick up to that second visit to the gentleman or the prospect next week. And that's probably my least succinct ending that I've had in quite a while, but that's what we're going to end on. So awesome.